Hello and welcome to your award-winning The Reasons I'm Broke podcast, bringing you the reasons we're broke every single week, ranging from comics, movies, TV, video games, and more. This week we are going through a special sector companioned with a guest that is returning, a co-host now, as we reformat the podcast with different co-hosts that have thankfully come up and said there is a future to the Reasons I'm Broke podcast. And Jared had come up with this idea of doing bonus episodes, which is going to be on Patreon first for 1 month, and then it'll release publicly on all of your favorite podcatchers. But if you're a Patreon backer, you're hearing this at least 30 days before everyone else. And this week we have Nick James from Buds, Bros, and Superheroes. You've heard him on the podcast back in 2019. He is returning and he will be one of the rotating co-hosts. Nick, thank you so much for not only doing this Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles retrospective episode, but for being formally a part of the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. When I got your message, I was very, very thrilled. I was absolutely humbled, and I'm very, very happy to be here.
It is an absolute honor, as always, to have not just people that, I've known for several years now. I've been following a couple of your projects that throughout the last couple of years, but also knowing that I'm doing this with people that kind of understand this world of not just DC Comics, but as we're going to explore today, the independent market, independent comic books too, as this was even an indie film. And you know what? Just to kind of kick things off with you, I want to ask you, what was your first exposure to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? Maybe your earliest memory, or if you remember, becoming a fan of TMNT.
I would definitely say it's got to be the cartoon, the '80s cartoon. I was born in 1990, so it was definitely on repeat. I don't think I ever watched it live, but I definitely remember the VHS tapes with the giant smiley turtles, right? Faces
Yes.
right on it. And, they would compile a few different episodes, so I don't think I watched it live, but I definitely remember watching that. And then this movie is another big standout of, I've definitely been watching this for over 20 years, probably since, 10 is probably when they started letting me watch it.
The cartoon, man, I went back and I made the mistake of revisiting those old cartoons probably 4 years ago, because I had fond memories of the live action movies, the cartoon, hearing the theme song. That's one of those where it's like my childhood anthem, along with Batman the Animated Series and Animaniacs, Tiny Toons. And it was a mistake because, as you know, the cartoon started before the movie, and the first movie established so many things that now exist in the TMNT comic books, in the lore of what they try to do today, that you go back and all four turtles are pretty much the same turtle when you go back and watch that cartoon. Have you made that same mistake at all?
No, I haven't actually seen I can't find it anywhere. I wanted to go back and put in a few times, but I don't have it on DVD. And I haven't been able to watch it. So this was really the first time I visited anything Turtles, other than, if you remember, the animated TMNT.
Mm-hmm.
I did that.
The 2000s one with the CGI characters?
Yeah, that really strange one that kind of landed in between the reboot and these ones.
Right. Yeah. I remember I was working at AMC at the time, and I fell asleep halfway through and I was with my friends and woke up and I was like, oh shit. The only other time that happened was Fuzz, Super Fuzz. It's that British live action. I can't remember what it was called. Hot Fuzz. That's the only other time I've fallen asleep during the movie. It was really bizarre, but thankfully we have this live action movie. I don't know if I have an earliest memory myself, because I know someone's going to, ask me to answer it on Twitter later, but my parents told me that when I grew up in Chicago, the city, and we were crossing the street, there weren't really, back then it was cross when you can, and it wasn't the greatest neighborhood, but my mom told me that I had a little Splinter action figure, and we were crossing the street and I dropped it and I was wanting to go back for it, and I was a little kid, and she's like, no, cars are coming. They don't stop. It's Chicago. So she pulled me, and then I saw a car go through that Splinter action figure and just went to pieces. And my mom said I was crying. I was destroyed. She couldn't find the replacement at the Toys R Us. And She told me that memory, so I've got that one in my head. But she also told me that they went through and got like the punk Donatello. They made all these different variants of the turtles because eventually you run out of ways to make the same four turtles, so you start making the different stylized ones and different action figures. So I guess a little positive there too in my earliest memories. Did you get some of those toys growing up?
Yeah, at least one set of the turtles. At
Nice.
least one set of all of them, because like you said, I remember the variants. And it more makes me think of the Batman ones, because I remember I had a lot of Batman variants of like him climbing snow or luging down a street and like stuff he didn't do. But my parents didn't fall for that for the turtles. They're like, you have four, because if you start doing variants of all four, all of a sudden you got 16 turtles. And I just remember there being a lot of monsters as well, like a lot more villains in the toys than on the show. Of me just going, when is this guy ever going to show up? And
Yeah.
he never did.
Yeah, and they did the same with Beast Wars, Transformers, where now they're putting them into the comics, which is really neat. They'll go back and visit the old toys and work them into the lore, which I thought was kind of a good idea, and I hope they do that with the Turtles. I'm sure they have at this point. Now, Tokar and Razor from the second Turtles movie just made their in-continuity debut this month in the comics, so it all comes full circle again.
That's amazing. I was wondering if we were going to talk about that, because that is, I definitely remember watching the first one as a kid and loving it. And I can't really remember seeing or loving the other ones. And I can't remember if it's because they're just weren't available. I really honestly, I was racking my brain of why I don't have the same love and the same kind of recall of watching it over and over as the first one. But I do remember in the second one, I was like, it's not Bebop and Rocksteady. Like, why are we making anthropomorphic bad guys and it's not the ones that we know? So
Mm-hmm.
to hear that they didn't even join canon until like right now, that's pretty funny. What were their names? You knew that right off the top of your head.
Tokar and Razor, and I only remembered because we've been playing HBO Max on repeat at the shop, and TMNT 1 and 2, I don't know what it is, it's like our Tuesday routine where every Tuesday when we're doing shipment, we play almost like the same playlist, and Turtles 2, we always like having that in the background because the scientist in that film, and if we do another retrospective on that one by itself, I want to go into it for sure, like real deeply, but the scientist in that voiced Ra's al Ghul in the animated series, so all we do is make up new dialogue of he's a scientist undercover. He's really, he's telling the League of Assassins to hold back, and he's going to let himself get captured by Shredder. So you just hear Ra's talking the whole time in the background because he doesn't change his voice. It's David Warner, and that's the only reason we've been playing that movie a lot.
The detective will never think to look for me here.
Yeah, that's right. And we even we came up with names that he would call Shredder, and we had this whole thing because the mutant ooze is really a derivative of ancient. It's a perversion of the Lazarus Pit. That's what it is, and it's weird because even in the movie they mention how this ooze came from years ago, and he himself, in character as the scientist, talks about how this may be from something further beyond time, even older. And I'm like, you're totally race right now. You're not even hiding it.
That's awesome.
But depending on if if you want to hear us, our companion on the other side of this podcast here, if you want to hear us talk about TMNT 2, let's see how this first one goes. And I think it's going to be fun going through this retrospective of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 1990 film, which was directed by Steve Barron, who did Coneheads. I remember renting that at Blockbuster when I was a kid, but I never made that connection between the two.
No, when I read that, I got ready for this and I read the same thing and I was like, really? That's freaking amazing. And the other thing he directed was he did a lot of music videos, which I was really surprised at. So if you like look at his IMDb credit, it's really long, but it's a lot of music videos. But he's worked with like Michael Jackson and Bowie and Madonna,
Wow.
and like a lot of big ass names. And I was like, that guy did the fucking Turtles. That's fucking amazing.
A little bit of trivia on the director. He was actually fired near the end of production. Producers thought that the film would be way too dark, and we don't really know how different the film would have been otherwise, but all of this, what we're seeing now with Warner Brothers and with superhero films, it's not brand new. This has been happening for years, but that's one bit of news or trivia I didn't know.
Yeah, it seems like they always want to stick their fingers in the pot. You know what I mean?
Right.
But what I learned, and like you kind of mentioned earlier, is like all the indiness of it, and it's really one of the highest grossing rated indie movies ever. Turns out it's
Mhm.
it was number 3 that year for kids movies and number 5 in all. Like
That's
that's a lot of
incredible. Yeah.
money. I think it got beat out by like Home Alone or something.
it's
And that
it
movie made so much. Sorry.
I didn't even know it was considered an independent film because you see the big New Line banner on it, but I'd have to look into the background of it more. But I believe it went under an independent film, like a studio, and then when New Line saw it, they picked it up and they did the mass distribution. But it's still considered an independent film because you see that happen even today, where someone will pick up someone's film, distribute it, and it's still considered an indie flick. And it wasn't until 1999's The Blair Witch Project, which that ended up topping it as under independent film, which made 135 million in the box office, domestic box office. So it was several years before we saw them toppled from the very top. The film
Yeah.
itself was written by Bobby Herbeck, who did Wrongfully Accused, Todd W. Langan from The Wonder Years, love The Wonder Years, and Bobby Herbeck from Small Wonder. It stars Judith Hoag from Armageddon, Elias Koteas from Thin Red Line, Josh Pace from Joker. I had to look that one up. He plays Arthur Fleck's boss. And then David Foreman from Skyfall. He's heavily involved in stunts, and he played the Shredder. No, he didn't do. He played one of the Turtles, but he's mainly involved in stunt movies. So that makes sense, especially with a film like The Turtles. Have you gone back and recognized any of these actors as you've gone through and watched more TV, more films, and kind of recognized them from Turtles, or is this kind of like basically it for him?
Going back, the number one person who I saw in this, and I didn't realize that I had to look up, was Sam Rockwell.
Yes, that's right. He plays a little punk kid.
He's like, you whatever you want to do, you do. I got cigarettes, menthol or regular. And I was, holy shit, that's Sam fucking Rockwell right now. That's amazing.
He was
And
like, yeah, what was he, like 19? I don't know. He was a baby.
Yeah, no, so I can actually look it up really quick what year he was born. If he was born in 68 and this movie was, so he's 22.
Probably playing like a teenager, because that's what this whole plot was, just getting young kids. And that's one thing I want to cover in this too. The plot, watching it again, and I still love this film, but were the Foot trying to just recruit kids? Or, because I didn't see any adults in the Foot, really. It was just teenagers.
Agreed, yeah. Like the really young kids, when we first kind of go into that hangout kind of lair, if you will, they're all really young. But then there's the martial arts side of it, and they look a little bit older, but not adults, as I would call them today. So no, I would agree. The plot of this, I don't really know, because something we can bring up whenever you want is like they capture Splinter,
Mm-hmm.
and then they don't really do anything, and they don't really tell anybody, and he's just kind of hanging out there for a while until he's got to do something. It's like, why? Where'd that go?
That's the one thing that as I was sitting there watching this, I didn't really get what the Foot were trying to do. They mentioned there's this one line as the news story is going through with April, how immigrants from Japan in New York they're like, the last time this happened, this kind of behavior with things getting stolen and these gangs going underground was in Japan with this ancient Foot Clan. And that was just touched on. They didn't really go into it. So I'm guessing the Foot, because I was trying to figure that out too. They steal from these New Yorkers, but you never see them reselling these things. They just kind of have it in this lair, and then he trains them as ninjas to steal more things. I mean, was I missing something?
No, it's on my notes as well of like, why were we doing this? What was his end goal? Because again, like you said, stealing secondhand televisions versus what he's got to pay out for cartons of cigarettes for these kids to smoke in arcade games. I don't see how much fucking money he could have been making. Like, where were we going with all this was definitely something I had questioned.
And the bit with Tatsu, they're in the lair, they're playing arcade games until the Shredder comes in and calls everyone, and then they initiate someone who has proven themselves to be a Foot ninja or a Foot Clan. So in the meantime, do the kids just hang out, play, and then train at their leisure? There wasn't, I missed that structure too. I wanted to explore all of that, and the film really didn't answer those questions.
Agreed. Yeah. Again, in my head, I don't know why it seemed to be some age thing where it's like, all right, you're really young. You're just going to get kind of sucked into this world. And when we need you, we'll start training you. But training for what? I don't need to learn how to kick somebody in the head to steal their stereo.
Right. And I would have liked to have seen them maybe and this would have been like a, and I don't, it's an independent script. It is what it is, but maybe tighten it a little bit by, they're teaching them the ways of the foot and stealth. And obviously that would work in well with stealing from people. And, you see them like put down the carton and then they turn around and it's gone. And it's like, that would have been kind of neat to see where it's like, that's how they're developing their skills. And Tatsu is, I guess, also involved in that training, and then as they develop even more, or maybe as you mentioned, as they reach a certain age, then they'll go through that other test. And I think that would have been a neat way to kind of explain their process. And I think I would have enjoyed it as an adult just to kind of see that aspect of it, even though as a kid I just wanted to see the turtles.
Yeah, as you're saying that, I actually kind of thinking, you could have given Sam Rockwell that to do. Instead of asking them for cigarettes, we could have walked around and been like, this is the blank where we do blank, and then over here, and yeah, given a little bit of exposition about what we're doing rather than just smoking cigarettes.
Yeah. So we find out that the Shredder is this older character that Splinter had mentioned, and we don't know how long ago all of this occurred, but the Shredder has since, I'm assuming, ran from Japan after, he committed these murders and redid this all in New York and kind of decided to rebuild his empire. Do you think that this particular version of Shredder was done well for its time? And did you feel like he was a threat to these turtles?
Yes and no. I remember being a kid and so the very end of it, they're all on a rooftop and they do the very ninja fighting of let's attack him one by one. And he kicks their ass in bits. So, I remember going, whoa. Again, that's what you do when there's a group. Because even if you watch these turtles as they fight, the Foot Clan also attacks them one by one. In terms of character, I think the movie wanted it to be a surprise that the Shredder was also the guy who was mentioned in Splinter's earlier story. Like, you're not going to know until I take off my mask and you see the same. Whereas I watched it this time, and maybe it's because I knew, but I was just like, I saw this coming. Mm-hmm. Is it because I knew it coming? Is it because I knew it was coming, or do you also feel the same way about that?
Maybe it's because I don't think it was a movie made for kids, though. And I was just going to say maybe it's because they were trying to keep it simple. They knew kids were going to, but I don't really think that was the intention. I think it was one of those cases where, like Batman the Animated Series, it was intended for an older audience, and it just happened to be that kids were buying the toys and picking up the comic books. And I think that's really a product of that time, because I don't know if you remember, but even movies like Aliens, Alien versus Predator, they made kids' toys. They knew that kids were going to watch all of these things anyway. So I guess there's not really that explanation. You can't just kind of give it a pass with that. But yeah, it did seem pretty obvious that, okay, so the bad guy is Hamato Yoshi, I think was the character's name. And yeah, you're right. You see it coming. It wasn't really that huge a surprise, but just seeing him, that voice over voice, I'm assuming it was a different actor that voiced him. That was really cool. I thought he was real threatening, a little Vader-ish, but
he definitely looked really good. I remember around the same time there was ads. Maybe it was for maybe it was for both. It's a cartoon and this, but it was for SpaghettiOs. It sticks out so clearly in my mind where he was on the can and he came off the can and that's another big thing in my mind. Whereas like when I look at them both now, I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what he looked like. Like, great job. I think though, going back to the cartoon though, when you said the voice of him and all that, like that voice from the cartoon, did you know that it's the dad from the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air?
No, I did not know that, and I've been watching that. That's really cool.
James Avery, yeah, I found that out. I think it was because of on Netflix, The Toys That Made Us.
Great show.
Yeah, I think he was brought in on that, or either that, or there's this awesome documentary about almost the entire lore of the Turtles, Turtle Power, the definitive history. It came out in 2014. I pulled that up too because I've watched that more than once, and watching that it's pretty cool because these guys didn't know. Yeah, if you don't know like the backstory or if anybody, like they just kind of started this as a joke almost, where this one guy was like, "Look, it's a Ninja Turtle." And the guy was like, "Fine, I'll draw 4 of them," and then they refined it, and then they put out one book, borrowing some money from their uncle, and then it sold out. So they put out another one, and like all of a sudden, boom, it's what we're talking about today.
Exactly, yeah. And it was originally, from what I remember, a parody of Daredevil, where you have the hand in Daredevil, and then here, so they did the foot. And as you mentioned, it wasn't intended to be this phenomenal hit. And thankfully it was. It's one of those things where the parody ends up being, at some point, at least in the 90s, I'm assuming it was more popular than Daredevil. Comic readers were probably like, no, Daredevil was the big thing. But if you look at the general audience, more people knew of the Turtles in the 90s than they did Daredevil.
I would have to agree. There's no way. I mean, I don't want to say Turtle Mania, but if you couldn't buy a Daredevil thermos,
Right.
box, you know what I mean? Or like a Daredevil backpack. Now you can get Charlie Cox probably on just about everything. But back in the day, like that was really where it was. Like I had a TMNT notebook or a TMNT pencil case. If they could slap those fucking turtles on it, they really did.
Yeah, let's talk about the Turtles, the look of these things, because I think that is, to me, the most impressive thing I found as I was rewatching this. Especially, we're seeing this in HD on Blu-ray. I don't know if there's a 4K release yet, but regardless of all of that, when I'm seeing the Turtles jump out in that opening scene and they've got the costumes on, they're moving their eyes and lips and everything, it still looks like they're living Ninja Turtles. It's way better than what they've been able to pull off in CGI, in my opinion. And I know CGI is the future, and maybe one day they'll revisit the costumes and puppets and give us one of those films. But I mean, was it still as impressive to you today as when we were kids?
Absolutely, yeah. It's something else that I had written down that still kind of it gave me goosebumps. Like you said, we hear them coming around the sewer, but before we see them, their logo pops up, and we've got like the great score, the ba-da-da-da, ba-da-ba-ba, and then there they are, and I was like, "Holy shit! Yeah, no, this still rocks. This is still doing it for me." And yeah, no, I would have completely agree. I can't understand why that also hasn't evolved. Like, why can't we get better puppetry as well?
Jumping a little ahead of with the movies, in the third one, the puppets looked even worse. So it's one of those things where it's a matter of the company that you get to do these costumes, because it was the Jim Henson Company, I believe, and they absolutely killed it with this. And you can look at all their productions, and it's astounding how much they really put into all the animatronics and the puppetry, and it paid off, because you still won't get any much better than Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 1 when you try to adapt these from the comics.
And then kind of going further down past the movies, the most recent incarnation in time that I saw, some people might call it heresy, and I'm okay with that, was in Power Rangers in space.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're a Power Ranger guy 100%, but every now and then I'll find myself hankering to watch a Power Ranger from the Zordon era, and the Power Rangers in space meet the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, because they also had a TV show on at the time. And it was scary looking, man. It was bad. And that's what I was thinking. I was thinking to myself, why is it that the 90s Turtles look better than this?
I know exactly what you're talking about. It's called The Next Mutation. It's on Netflix right now, in case you want to go back and watch it. And I believe the crossover episodes for Power Rangers are in that season. I can't recall, but it is awful. You get Venus, the first female Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, and they have since not yet put her in the comics. They instead did Jenica to do their own take on the first female turtle, at least in continuity. So I know exactly what you're talking about. It's scary, but when you see those costumes in this film, and you see them doing flips and kicking and punching and using weapons, and the costumes still hold up. They don't look like rubber. They don't look like they needed to do this 18 different times. Some of these takes are longer than they should be. I think you would kind of expect 18 different cuts in one little fight sequence, but you see it all here. You see them roll around. You see they're talking as they're doing all of these amazing martial arts in those big fucking costumes. And that's another thing where, as an adult, I'm like, holy shit, how did they pull this off so well?
I think they talked about that in the doc a little bit. So you'll see, like, when they're talking, all the animatronics are in their shell. So when they're not, it's a little bit lighter, but then you don't get as much face movement. But these guys were, like, exhausted. Literally, they do something, and they had to have horses, like, not real, like, neigh horses, like a carpenter horse, to come around so they can kind of weirdly get up behind them and rest the shell on it or rest above, because when they're talking and the animatronics are in the shell, they said it weighed, I can't remember the number and I don't want to disrespect, but I want to say it was like 50, 60 pounds, something like that.
That's
insane.
Yeah.
No.
The turtles themselves, seeing how they had a personality, unlike the cartoon, and this one cemented, Leonardo as this leader type role. At least the attitude was, I think, what we expect now out of all of these comics and cartoons. Raphael in the cartoon, he's just like the rest of his brothers, jokey and not really rough around the edges. But in this one, they really establish him as somewhat of an outsider. And there's this amazing scene where Splinter is telling him, you're different than your brothers because you take all of this on internally by yourself. And I'm just reminding you that I love you. I'm here for you. And next time you face these things, know that we're here for you. You don't have to do these things alone. And it's these scenes that hit me harder as an adult, as a son, a father, a brother. Like there's all these different things that are hitting me. And I teared up during that scene. It's just, and you see Raphael weeping. And there's these moments here that tells you that it's not a kid's movie. It's really, there's so many layers here to these characters and specifically to Raphael.
Yeah, he definitely gets the most. And that's another scene where it's just so dark, super intimate with the candle, and it's just puppets. That rat, we are talking, there is a man inside the suit for Raph, but Splinter's just a straight up puppet. So it's just some guy moving him and stuff. And yeah, no, that is a really good scene. And like I said, I was said it to my wife as we were watching. Actually, I was like, this is not meant for children.
Right.
I remember being a kid, and like you kind of mentioned earlier, of just like, when are they going to fight? Come on, let's go. Or like, when are they going to order the pizza? I love that fucking scene at the beginning with the Domino's guy, like 178 and a half, 170. Hey, you're 10 seconds late, or what? Wise man said, don't pay full price for late pizza. But as an adult now watching, I was like, holy shit. And then, the spiritual thing when they're all around the fire, and even Splinter comes up in the blue fire, and he's just like, it's all about being brothers. I love that. It's so good.
And he kind of gives them that final message. It feels like Splinter has accepted that he's going to get killed at any moment. They're not going to come and rescue him, but he just wants to give them that final message of you all have reached this level now, almost as if there's not much more I can teach you, but you all have each other. You're all together as one family unit. And he kind of says his goodbye to them in that scene. And you see Mikey crying. And, I read it as, Splinter did not expect them to come in and save them or even return to New York. It was kind of him saying goodbye to his kids.
Yeah, because Shredder never sent him or them a ransom note. They didn't know. All of a sudden he disappeared. They show up at April's and they're like, Splinter's gone. And they never got like a ransom or anything up until that point, even saying that he was alive. So they definitely, why would Splinter think that they were coming? So I agree with the fact that he was like, this is it, guys. This is the final one. I love you guys. It was touching. It's crazy.
It really is. And were there any other turtles outside of Raphael that you kind of felt that they really carved their own path with as you were watching this?
No. I mean, like you said, Leo kind of got the leader thing going. But the parts, where Mikey and Donnie, they were about to fight, and it's like, should we go into the other room? Mm-hmm. And it's like, yeah, go ahead, scoot away, go eat pizza and make a joke or something. Mm-hmm. They got the most jokes, where I think those two are the hardest to separate in this movie, which makes me pissed because I love Donatello. Like, he didn't build or make, like, I like the techie side of that. And they didn't go for that at all in this story arc, which I get because it's kind of a little bit more out there. Especially when you looked at their hands, like thinking of that guy working a screwdriver.
Right.
I don't buy it. But did you know who voices him in this movie?
Donatello? No.
You ready for this?
Okay.
It's Corey fucking Feldman.
Really?
Yeah, isn't that weird?
He didn't return for the second one, right? Did something happen between? Is he a controversial celebrity these days or no?
These days, yeah. He was in some sort of something recently where he got in trouble. He was going to put something on the internet, like a documentary, and then he didn't, or he did, and he said he didn't. I didn't follow because he's one of those guys who gets the attention wherever he can, really.
Yeah, it sounds like maybe that even happened back then, because if you notice from the first one to the second one, the voice is completely different for Donnie, and that's when they started really establishing him as the techie. But it's exactly what you said, where he was just a jokey character along with Mikey, which worked out for, Kelly and I, because that's our favorite turtles, and they have so many scenes together. And I think it is because, as you said, they retreat when Leonardo and Raphael start butting heads, and they really do have more character development in this film. And overall, I think it's almost like Raphael's movie in a way, and maybe Leonardo would be the secondary character there because he also learns to kind of ask for, not forgiveness, but to apologize to Raphael about the things that he said before that amazing scene happened on the rooftop where they throw fucking Raphael through the goddamn glass. And it's so crazy. Even as a kid, that's one of those scenes that I remembered and I probably will never forget. It's so impactful to see them just toss him through there in the middle of that fight. Raphael he's not in a great state, and that's when it all kind of revolves around, coming back together. They don't fight as well without Raphael. Thankfully, Casey is there, but I do think that if you're a Raphael fan, this is really the movie for you, especially.
Now, do you think that if you saw him in his trench coat and hat, that you really wouldn't see without a fucking turtle?
That was one of the things. He's sitting in the theater. He's able to order a ticket, and there's that one scene where he flips over the car, and the driver, I think, even mentioned like it looked like a turtle in a trench coat. It's almost like they knew how ridiculous it kind of looked. But no, there's no way he sneaks by anyone.
I love that what you just brought up for two reasons. Because A, the cabbie is totally, in my opinion, would be a New Yorker of like, yeah, so where are we going? Like, it could have been. But also, that guy in the cab is the voice of Raphael.
Amazing. Yeah, so that's the, what's his name? So he was in Joker, I believe. I think that's the same guy, because he was the only, Josh Pace, or Pais, however you pronounce it, but he's the only actor who physically portrays him and voices him in the film. The rest of the Turtles have another actor body them and another actor voice them. So that's amazing that he was able to pull off both.
I got one more for you.
Go for it.
It's not that impressive, but Michelangelo was voiced by Robbie Rist, and that was Cousin Oliver in the fucking Brady Bunch.
Wow. Fucking Cousin Oliver.
Forever. Like, holy shit, what a weird connection, but
I wonder what he's going to be known more for. Is he going to be known for TMNT or the Brady Bunch?
Now he's going to be now absolutely, in my mind, he's always going to be Michelangelo.
Awesome. I love it. So going through some more of the film and the relationship, I think, between Casey and April, like I think it is kind of a product of its time. You see him kind of force her down on the chair and he's giving her the massage, and back then it's like, oh, that's charming. What'd you think of the Casey character overall? Because it seems like they wrote him as kind of like, not the smartest guy. He kind of struggles with what the Turtles are telling him, and he's definitely more street smart than anything. But how do you feel that he fit in with the rest of these Turtles, especially during a time when Raphael wasn't available for like a quarter of the film?
Well, I don't mean to answer your question with a question, but I'm going to. What the fuck was his plan beating up those purse snatchers who Raph stopped anyway?
I guess he was going to cripple them. I really don't know. Like, if they're going with the comics version, he was going to further hurt them. And I guess that was his MO. That's just what he did. They never explained his backstory either.
No, because when I was watching, I was like, wait, they threw the purse back. Like, they got the purse back. And like this guy, like, I thought it was funny too when he pointed to his sigh, Raphael. He's like, kind of pointing like I got a piece almost, but it's a sigh. And they run away. But then later on, they get jumped. And I was very confused by that. Like, I guess what? He just wanted to further instill the fact of you don't purse snatch and I'm gonna cripple you.
Yeah, it's like a diet Punisher, because he wasn't gonna kill them.
I love that. Sorry.
And when they run away, he gets really pissed off at Raphael, and he's like, all right, now you're gonna be the one that I'm gonna beat up. And I think he kind of realizes that Raphael is a martial artist, and he's not gonna easily take him out like he was these street guys. But it was an interesting way to introduce him into it, with him clashing against Raphael, someone who is a hothead, someone who is already kind of estranged from the rest of his family. And then he comes across this character who is also a little bit of a hothead too, and he's able to save the Turtles during that scene at April's antique shop.
Yeah, that's another thing. Like, it's very lucky for him that Raph likes to go out on his own, because if Raph wasn't standing on a roof, conveniently next to the roof that Casey was sitting on, then what would have happened?
Yeah, I noticed that too on the rewatch. It's like, holy shit, Casey has amazing eyesight. He's able to spot him right there. No other New Yorker saw him. He knew to be there. The same thing happened at the end when Danny sneaks out. And we got to talk about Danny. And when he sneaks out of the sewer and then he wakes up in the truck and it's like, all right, now time to follow this kid and figure out. It's like, you've also got some James Bond skills. It's like, he's probably one of the most useful characters in this film.
I was going to bring that up too. Yeah. So when you asked, like, how'd you feel about him? Like, I loved him as a kid, because definitely the design, not until now when you said Diet Punisher, and I'm going to use that for the rest of forever. But, it's kind of a skull-like, but the hockey mask is cool. And then when I went back for the rewatch, I was like, oh, you're a plot device, man. You're just the guy who's there to make sure when they need something, like, oh, this guy conveniently is sitting somewhere that sees the plot going on. And He's there to save the day.
Yeah, that was exactly his role. You're right. And the scene at the end after the shredder falls into that trash compactor and you just see him whoops turn it on. I was like, what the fuck? He just murdered that guy.
Yeah, plot device man to homicidal maniac man in a flip of a switch, and nobody said a fucking thing.
Nope. You see his helmet getting crushed. And if we hadn't had a sequel, it's like Casey killed the shredder. Like that's it. It's done. And it wasn't it's meant to be funny, I think. It's just
Yeah.
wow. Yeah, Casey, interesting character too with as I mentioned with April. How do you feel about this April compared to like the cartoon one or the ones we've gotten since?
In the little bit of research I did for this, unfortunately, I found out she's the reason April in the movie didn't wear the yellow jumpsuit. So I'm going to hold her to that. But other than that, I really like her performance.
So what do you mean? What happened with that?
She put on the jumpsuit and apparently she was like, no, don't like it.
Huh.
And apparently, like, also too, and I don't want to, go around blasting her, but more of what I found on her was negative than positive. Of she also thought that it was really violent. Because that was another thing Jim Henson also said. He was like, "Oh, I didn't know I was making something that was going to have so much kicking and stuff involved." And at the end of the day, when you watch it now, it's like, really, this is okay. He spits water at him for fuck's sake,
right?
He's spinning his nunchucks on his finger, or is it nunchucks? I don't know. It's pretty tame, but apparently she was just a pain in the ass to work with, and that's why she didn't come back or wasn't invited back for the second one.
Interesting. Yeah, because I thought she was really good, April. She's a charming actor, and I thought there wasn't a scene in there where I'm like, oh, she's just an annoying. It was fine. I thought it was it was cool that I bought that she was really interacting with the turtles, with Splinter, with Casey even. I'm like, yeah, there's a little bit of chemistry there. Sure, I'll buy it, because sometimes you watch these movies and you're like, no way. But she was very personable, and it's a shame that unfortunately she felt that way, because I would have loved to have seen her in the two sequels, but that's too bad. And I know they celebrated her recently with the anniversary stream, and I don't know if has since changed her views on whether or not this was too violent, but I guess putting that aside, she was still, at the end of the day, no yellow jumpsuit. I hadn't even noticed that. That's true.
Just the jacket at the very beginning, and we lost that pretty quickly as well.
Yeah, and that was it. And they made her they made her into an artist in this one. So she's a television reporter. She busts that commissioner's balls the whole movie because he's not doing enough, I guess. And that guy is amazing. I don't know who that actor is, but I love him. Just the way he blows up on her, and she just calls him out on the air just because I guess it needs to be done. But she's like, he's yelling at her, and oh, I love that guy.
Raymond Serra, it says his name is. Yeah, he's really good in it as well. I just wanted to kind of double back to what you said about Judith Hogan interacting with the turtles, because the one thing that I love is when she wakes up, and there's also like that awesome. I think the entire score is also perfect throughout. So like as she's waking up and she makes those weird, she's not yelling, she's almost squealing, and then she's just like, okay, and like again, as I watched it this time, it was perfect. I was like, I fucking believe all of this. I really do believe it. It wasn't. There was very small leap of faith of going, this bitch is sitting in the sewer looking at these turtles right now with this rat.
Right. Giant rat. She says at one point, like, why couldn't I dream about Harrison Ford? She thinks it's all a dream. And let's talk about the soundtrack, because that's iconic for this. You hear one note from the soundtrack and immediately turtles, like doon, 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 doon. It's constantly throughout it. I remember it clearly as a kid. Stuck with me. That's another thing that's going to stick with me for the rest of my life, is the soundtrack to this film. I don't even know how to describe it as. It's not comic booky. It's not, I guess, New York darkish. I don't really know how to describe it, but it's just inherently stuck to this movie forever. You can't really find something else like it.
And it goes just all over the place in terms of tone, because like you said, when they open and they're showing you all the shots in New York and they're expositioning that this foot is taken over, like you said, that boom, 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 boom is amazing. But then on the reverse side of that, when we first meet the turtles, like I was talking about, it's that upbeat, and it's amazing because, like you said, it's almost up there with Superman for me. Like I can hear that and got it. Superman. This one, turtles. Like it's perfect.
It really is, and there's even a theme song for the final fight against Shredder, and I think it's the only time they use it. And it's just in that scene. And that's another one of those like, okay, this was clearly on the cusp of 80s and 90s because it's got a little bit of that 80s taste in there. And yeah, the soundtrack is incredible. And you have yet another different soundtrack, or at least a different sound when they're at the barn and they're all healing and they're figuring everything out, and it all kind of slows down. And I don't think there was any part of the soundtrack that was, didn't match whatever was happening on screen. I can't find anything wrong with the soundtrack, to be honest with you.
No, it matches tone the entire way through. I'd like to as well, when you're talking about the barn scene, kind of double back on what you said too with the artist. Like, I love that still, like seeing that now. I was like, oh yeah, I kind of forgot about that. When it transitions from them working it's Donnie working on the truck and she's drawing it and transitions to him, and then backwards with Leo sitting in the chair and stuff. Like, I forgot how much of this was really, really touching.
Yeah, and I remember Danny takes one of those pieces and he's like, "Can I keep this?" And April's like, "Sure." And he just folds it right up and sticks it in his back pocket. And I want to talk about what I think is the weakest character in the film. And I get that it's, I guess, to relate to teens or kids, just kind of have that message. But Danny, I mean, I don't know. Like, yeah, he's that connection between Splinter and the Turtles, but to me, I thought the kid was annoying. He was that part. Even rewatching it, I'm like, all right, he's the rebellious teenager. He's obviously going to be joining the Foot, but he has this change of heart, I guess, even though he rats them out. And I don't know. What were your thoughts on Danny?
Yeah, if Casey Jones is exposition man, Danny is definitely his sidekick. Foreshadowing boy of like, yeah, let me take this photo, put it in my back pocket, and go to the lair in which I know they're hunting for one of the people if I have a picture of in my back pocket. They'll never find it. Like, what the fuck are you doing? And then, like you said too, with him and Casey seeing each other or not seeing each other, however you want to look at it, when he's coming up out of it, you're like, well, that was convenient as shit too. Why were you living in the sewer? Why'd you go to that place? Again, no, I agree with you. He's annoying as shit.
That would have been another, I think, nice script rewrite where maybe if Casey and Danny had that relationship, maybe at the barn, or a scene where maybe Casey will tell him something like, I went down that path that you're going down, and now I'm beating up guys on the streets, but I'm trying to do some good today. Or, maybe if they had something like that, that would have meant more when he connected with him in the lair later on after he followed him. And like just a little thing like that, I felt like it would have made that relationship between Casey and Danny actually something, instead of just focusing on Danny and I guess his dad. He doesn't really have a connection with anyone, maybe April a little bit.
And then his biggest character point, in my opinion, is it's Dan.
Yes, at the very end, he was like, "It's Dan, Dad.
Don't call me Danny anymore, Dad. I'm a big boy now. Call me Dan." Really, that's good. Good for you, kid. You gave back April's money. You're Dan now. Go off into the fucking world and stop bothering me on the Turtles.
I've gone through my journey in the movie.
Yeah. Yep. Glad you were there. That's awesome. Good for you, kid.
And I love Tatsu. I got to tell you, like, he's the right-hand man to Shredder. There is really not much either an explanation. I'm assuming he came from Japan as well with Shredder, and he might have been his right-hand man, but that's another character that I would have loved to have seen a little bit of backstory to. And I know we didn't need it. He has that fight with Casey Jones, but he was just entertaining. And yes, he was redubbed over by someone else. They felt that little bit of trivia too, is they felt his real voice was too high pitched to be threatening at all. So they redubbed him in the two films that he appeared in. But in this one, he trains these kids and he beats them up, has no problem with it, despicable in that aspect. In the original cut of the film, and I don't know if you knew this one, but when he's trashing up the lair and he beats up that kid, he murders him. And they had to go back and edit in some like coughing, like, oh, he's going to be okay. But when you see the film and this, and you see the kid lying there unconscious, it's like, that kid really is dead. He's not going to get up and cough. And that makes more sense when Tatsu's like, oh shit. Like you see that look on his face, like, I just killed that kid. And that's another character that I feel like he could have maybe used a little bit more backstory to kind of make him a little more interesting.
You just reminded me of Dodgeball when he's like, I think that guy's really dead. Yeah, no, I did know that he was fucking dead, and they ADR'd some kid going in there like, I think he'll be okay, or something like that. Because when you're watching it, if you watched it on mute, you go, that kid's fucking dead.
Mm-hmm.
If you unmute it, you're right. They put in a little bit of something where it's like, no, he survived. It's
Yeah,
like every cartoon growing up around the same time where you see somebody fall out of a helicopter and then the next frame they're like, oh God, all right, no, that's okay.
right. Or the parachute. You see that sometimes in cartoons, especially in Batman the Animated Series. Yeah. Tatsu himself is another one that I would love to see them work him into the comic books. Maybe giving him a backstory, just like they did with the two mutants from the sequel. And I don't know why I have that curiosity of that character, going back and rewatching this movie and the sequel, because I don't know if anyone else is asking for a Tatsu one shot or backstory, but I might be alone on this one.
Yeah, no, I don't mean to disagree with you, but he was okay. Again, I thought his voice seemed funny, so it's weird to find out that they basically took that away. Do you know if he knew they were going to do that?
For sure, the sequel, I'm assuming, but I mean, you see him doing the lines, and that's one thing I don't know. I don't know if they later went, okay, well, here's the cut of the film. We have to go back and revoice you, and clearly it didn't bother him enough for to not come back for the sequel because it's the same voice guy. But no, that'd be interesting to see what his reaction would have been.
They just David Browsed him. I think that guy's name is from Star Wars. The guy actually in the Vader suit. That's not James Earl Jones doing the voice.
Oh, was that who they have him credited as?
No,
I see what
no.
you're saying. Okay, yeah,
Yeah, it's almost the same thing as the Star Wars because later I didn't know that wasn't him in the costume when I was a kid. So up
yeah.
until I didn't know that they had a different guy dubbing him until you just said that. To be honest,
Well, yeah, and I guess he was upset, right? What was his name? David
Prowse, I believe.
Prowse, and he had that resentment for years up until his death. Of he thought he was going to be Darth Vader throughout all of these films during the unmasking. And I don't know if you saw that. I don't know if it was a documentary or if it was a part of those Netflix documentaries, but they went back and refilmed that shot of the unmasking with him in the suit to just kind of give him that closure. And unfortunately, they could not distribute that scene anywhere. They were only able to screen it once in, I believe it was a theater in California. But that's kind of how he got his closure towards the end of his life.
I didn't know that, and that's crazy. I didn't know that whole story. I think you're right. There is an entire doc just on him about that because I think I remember watching it, and that's why I can even kind of recall his name. But I remember I didn't know anything about that, nor now did I know that. So that's why I'm sitting around wondering if Toshiro Obata is like, hey, that wasn't my voice, god damn it. Scary.
And if he were upset, I'd be the only guy like campaigning, like, let's get his original voice in there. Let's get a cut of that. And it'd get no traction, but it's all right.
But it is funny, to Michael McConaughey is what the guys who voice them is like. I remembered go play when he makes little fingers of running. Like I do remember that up until now. I was like, oh yeah, I remember that scene. So I guess overall it was a good call.
Yeah. And another funny line from that one is when he's talking to Shredder and almost in like a childish way, he asks him, why do the turtles trouble you? Like he's just so concerned for Shredder. Like he's his right hand man and he wants to know. And that's when he kind of tells him a little bit about, it's something from my past, but not even Tatsu knows that, this backstory of Splinter and probably doesn't even know about him murdering, someone that he wanted to be with and couldn't be with. So there's a lot of questions that came up as I was watching this, and so many secrets kept even between the villains.
Yeah, now that you're saying it, why is he so devoted? Now that you're saying it, fuck yeah, let's get on that one off. I'd want to know.
See, like
it had to have happened really good that he's like, what's wrong, man? Look at us. We've got kids running around stealing shit. You look really awesome. And like, why are you still so sad about turtles? He cares. You're right. What the fuck is going on there?
And now, as you were watching this, I watched this one when I rewatched it. I watched it by myself. Was there anything that came up as you were watching it with your wife on, like, oh, I didn't remember this, or I did, or did you have any kind of impressions that really stuck out as you were going through it?
Just that it looked really amazing. Still, I still couldn't really believe how well that held up. Again, I think I touched on it. I don't mean to be mean towards it. Just some of the, I don't want to say it's maybe not plot holes is not the word, but just thinness of like, yeah, good thing Casey was fucking sitting there and little things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, no, I watched this today. I was like, I want to show this to my nephew because I think he would dig it.
Yeah, and it's one I want to show even Leo. He's 3 years old, and he has seen the recent Nickelodeon CGI cartoon. I don't even know if you want to call it a cartoon. Do they call cartoons CGI shows? Or are they considered cartoons?
Oh, yeah. Because, yeah, I don't know. Shit. Let me
I'm
double guess myself.
I'm old, so to me, cartoon is hand drawn. You know,
2D,
so.
yeah.
But anyway, he sees that, he loves it, and I want to show him this one because I don't feel like I was scarred or troubled by any scene in the film, and nothing scared me for this movie when I was a kid. So I think Leo, showing this to Leo as he's kind of comprehending and he can sit through a whole film would be okay, and I think kids today might even appreciate this more because there seems to be this weird retraction of technology, and I noticed this with people younger people that I work with, that they're not as they're going back and they're buying Polaroid cameras to take pictures with their friends and everything. So I feel like the current generations might appreciate that there's no CGI in this movie and it's all practical effects with guys in suits. It's one of those things that I think it'll forever be evergreen content, especially, how many years is it now? 30 years later, and it's still impressive to see. It's always going to be, I think, a treasure of action cinema or comic book cinema because I don't think it's ever going to hit the Library of Congress, but shit, like you can still go back and value what they did in this movie.
Yeah. Kind of saying, adding on to that, like for what we call an independent film, it definitely broke a lot of stuff. So it sits there kind of showing what you could do with, I think the word independent gets lost when you hear it made 13 or it took 13 million to make or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So you're like, no, any movie can cost millions of dollars. But at the time we talked about earlier with the distribution and stuff like that, until New Line picked it up. And in the 90s, like, yeah, they had Freddy Krueger and stuff like that, but it was definitely pre Lord of the Rings,
Right.
So they weren't as huge as they were. So kind of on that pillar it stands. And like we've been saying this whole time too, in terms of puppetry, it stands still to this fucking day. Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And then as well as taking a property, and I think that it took a little bit of the grit from the original comic book and a little bit of what was going on in the cartoons and kind of amalgam them into this perfect uniform story of what is. It's got a little bit of everything.
Did you have any other bit of trivia or like facts that you might have found as you were going through and rewatching this one?
Yes, sir. Just the last one I have here on my list. At the very end, Mr. Sam Rockwell is talking to the police, and he says, if you go down to the East Warehouse at Lairdman Island, you'll get answers.
There we go. Eastman and Laird, right?
So the creators of the TMNT are Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird. So that was their little hey. And if I'm not mistaken, too, there's a scene where they're in the back as like trash men.
Jesus.
It's not even a line or a close up or anything like that. You could just see their figures walking and they can point and be like, that's me. But unless somebody pointed it out to you, I don't think, like, I can't even remember it. That's how small it is. But they are somewhere stuck in there. And then that little line is also a tip of the hat to them.
I'm going to have to go back and check that scene out because I know after this movie came out, they weren't entirely happy with the rest of the films in the series, starting with the second one. We were talking about Bebop and Rocksteady, how they weren't in the sequel, and apparently they didn't want them to use those characters for that film. And I don't know if it's because of the new direction that they went in over making it less violent. Obviously, the impact of this movie, I don't think there was any major backlash as far as like kids are going around with trying to find swords, but they're hitting each other with sticks. I don't think that ever happened. So I think it's fascinating that they kind of backtracked on the first film and kind of toned down the violence for the Turtles moving forward. Even today, you don't see Leonardo, unless they're foot ninjas that are robotic, like in the cartoon, you don't see him use his swords to stab anything. You see him holding the swords and then he kicks, you know what I mean? Or he'll just tackle them or headbutt them. And it's kind of interesting that you see Leonardo just holding those things and not really using them. And I think that maybe this movie might be the last time that you really see all four turtles effectively utilize their weapons. Now, I'm not saying that he needs to be cutting off limbs in this thing, but he actually uses them in the film.
I actually lied to you, and I have one more little fact to
let's hear it
about the weapons. Is in the UK, actually, they did have to modify this film for two different reasons. Number one is they don't like the word ninja at the time, so it was Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles, even the cartoon. And Donatello, or no, excuse me, Michelangelo was not allowed to have his nunchucks. They replaced it with something else because, again, they were just dead scared of it for reasons unknown.
That's interesting. So they went back and edited the film, or were there two different scenes of him holding different weapons?
It made it sound, yeah, that they went back and edited it differently.
Wow.
So definitely the scene where it's spinning on his fingers is out of there. There's a lot of different things that were taken out because of they don't like nunchucks. I couldn't get an answer on that of like what was it about the word ninja and nunchucks that scared them so much? And all I kept finding was nope, they just changed it. I know that, but why? And nobody could give me an answer on the internet.
They didn't like it. Why though? They just didn't. All right. I wonder why nunchucks too, because that's not easily accessible. You know, it's not something kids. I think kids could find a big stick like Donatello's much easier. They can even use forks and pretend to be Raphael if they wanted to. But nunchucks, that's interesting. Yeah, you can't even make them really. I can't think of anything I could find as a kid to try to replicate those weapons.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, like you said, swords is the number one that I thought would be crossed off first. Like, yeah, sides are pointy too, but those are a little bit like swords are meant specifically for slicing and cutting and stuff like that. A sai, I believe, was originally used for like farmers or stuff like that. Whereas a katana is a katana for one fucking reason, and that's to fuck people up with it. But they're like, that's fine. The nunchuck boy, though, I don't like that.
So weird.
Isn't it? It's yeah, fucking I am.
Wow.
But can you imagine seeing Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles?
You know what? That's the name of today's episode. That's what it is. Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles. Jesus. Like it's like they just went, yeah, just whatever. They came up with they went with the first idea on that one. They didn't even try to come up with something similar to Ninja.
No, yeah, it doesn't even start with I don't care. We're not going for alliteration. It doesn't have to be TMNT. TMHT sounds just as fine.
No one's going to watch this thing. Just release it.
Yeah, that was the attitude, too, of just like make the toys, we'll sell the toys, and I guess this will kind of play in the sideburn or in the sidetrack. And then all of a sudden, it was the greatest cartoon ever for the time. Made so much money for him.
To kind of wrap up this retrospective episode on the Turtles, aside from what we overall felt on this first film and rewatching it many years later, do the Turtles kind of hold that special place in your heart today, whether it's because of the comics or the cartoons, as it did when you were a kid?
Yeah, I gave the live action ones a chance, and they're there. No, they're there. I'm not going to say I wish they weren't made, because there are certain things in there that I was like, okay, that's no. Even as I say that, I can't really fully get through that.
Well, you know what? They pulled off the Krang in a way.
Yeah, let's go with that. Oh, that was the second one. I think I only saw that one like once or twice, which is weird because that had the Bebop and Rocksteady, but I don't know. I think the post-credit scene of that first one that they tried to do where the shells were on a Victoria's Secret billboard, like that was their last joke that they went out of. I was like, all right, I'll wait for the next one. And then it might have taken a while. But something I learned of recently that I want to look into and find is apparently there's some sort of, again, I don't know if we call it animated movie, but where the current turtles meet the turtles of our day and they go on an adventure and even pull in black and white turtles from like the earliest days, if you will. And they've all got to fight a bad guy.
Turtles Forever. Yeah, I remember that. It aired on TV and they were trying to get the original voice actors from the cartoon, but they couldn't make it work, unfortunately. And they have since crossed over again, but it wasn't that big like Turtles verse, kind of like Into the Spider-Verse, unfortunately, that they had to kind of recast those 90s Turtles, which was a shame, but you know what? They still, used what they could. And I remember, I know exactly what you're talking about.
So in terms of that, I'd see that when you guys did the episode on The Last Ronin, I was all for that. I was listening to that. So yeah, no, the Turtles definitely have a place in my heart. Will forever be something I will take interest in and peek in on as long as they keep making new stuff.
Yeah, I think it is a brand or a franchise that still has a lot of legs on it. They can still do a lot with it. Even you can adapt The Last Ronin, which has been wildly popular with not just collectors, but with actual readers, which I think is important. That's what's going to give that, the adaptation later on and get people excited about seeing those things. And whatever they do later on, which I actually do want to ask you, I think people will be there to see it. What would you like to see in media come out of the Turtles?
I'm excited to see what Seth Rogen's doing with it.
Is he doing a film?
Yeah, he's doing something with it where the last thing that I heard, he was saying basically it's kind of we're fucked in the sense that Marvel makes comedies, and now they're making $100 billion or however, whatever realistic thing is, comedies. And it was in that interview that he said something about the Turtles, and I believe what I'm trying to remember is something about I want to find the teenage in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and kind of take it back to that. That's what's coming to mind. I don't want to misspeak and all, but I'm pretty sure that he's going to be doing something with it and trying to find a different angle to it. So I personally think he's funny. I like what he's doing in terms of other comic book properties. Priest was pretty cool, and he's been doing other things, and his attitude of I'm going to do it before somebody else starts to do it and fucks it up.
No, I
like that.
Definitely a good take. I think that is the attitude to take, I think, with a lot of these characters and franchises. So you're looking forward to the film. Anything else that you'd want to see, like a cartoon or a show, or do you kind of want them to take it easy and kind of find that hit first?
I don't know. When you put it that way, the latter sounds smart, but the former sounds like me, where it's like, give me it all,
Yeah.
I am that person. I am just a glutton for it, where even the bad stuff, I'm like, I'll watch it, I like Kevin Smith a lot, and his buddy Jay Muse, he always talks about, like, Jay's never read a bad comic book. You ask Jay, like, what's his favorite part about this comic? And it's like, it was in color.
Yeah.
Where I could find something good in just about anything. So yeah, if you're going to give me the 4 talking turtles, part of me wants to say do it, but when you put it the way you did, of like, don't you think maybe instead of blasting everywhere, they should sit down and kind of come up with one solid thing to put out? Yeah, that sounds smarter. They should probably do that.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out in the next 5 years, where the Turtles go from here. Do you have any final thoughts about this 1990s film before we wrap up today's special episode?
I was very, very pleased with how much I liked it and how much I was able to sit down and enjoy it and not have to, all right, let's see it, or be reminded that it wasn't a nostalgia machine that makes this good, that this movie was actually really good. I liked it still. Puppetry. I'm sorry to cut you off there, but
no, absolutely. The puppetry was amazing, and I think you're right that it wasn't a victim of, oh shit, I liked this as a kid and I have fond memories of it, but today, damn, I kind of ruined it for myself. And it's one of those where no, it's now I appreciate it in a whole different way, and I agree with you there. So there you have it, Brocat Core members, a revisit at the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and an amazing co-host in this round of what is the kind of evolution or transition of the podcast. And Nick, I want to thank you for joining on not just this episode, but in future ones. Where can our companion find you, whether it's Twitter, Instagram? Do you have other projects you have lined up currently?
Yeah, right now I am the host of Buds, Bros, and Superheroes with Big Body Bigs, and we do a show where we talk about Buds, Bros, and Superheroes. It's very cleverly named. We're doing that right now weekly. We are thinking about maybe switching up the format. More news to come. So to keep up on all that news, if you could follow us, we're on all the basic social medias. You can get the podcast just about everywhere else. It's Buds, Bros, and Superheroes. Thank you very much for letting me do that. But hopefully we can have you, and we'll do a crossover on that one.
That would be a lot of fun. And see, this is why Nick does an amazing job. He's also a podcaster. You're going to make editing really easy for me.
I appreciate that as a compliment, because I've been listening to you for a while. So to have you say that, it's very nice as well. Thank you. This has been so much fun and really, really good conversation. I can't believe 70 minutes. We've been doing this for 70 minutes. Boom. And now craziness.
That's right. Yeah, thank you so much once again, Nick. And if you've enjoyed the podcast, on the other side, let us know on Twitter as well, at Reasons I'm Broke. We also have a Patreon, patreon.com/The Reasons I'm Broke. For as little as $1 a month, you get the episodes early, or in this case, sometimes 30 days earlier. Every week, though, at the very least a few days early. But otherwise, thank you so much for tuning in. Brocat Core, all will be well. Turtle boobs, Nick. Do you remember Turtle boobs from the Next Mutation, that Power Rangers crossover that you were talking about?
Yeah, I remember being very confused at that, because during those times was the adolescent time where almost anything could get me going. And I was looking at that going, there's still something fucking weird about this. Like, what's going on there?
It's like they're not mammals, but they have boobs. But why is the shell still shaped? There's a scene in which Michelangelo is staring at them. I don't know if you go back and watch the show when she first debuts, he's looking at him and then looking at her and like, whoa. And they did not shy away from the fact of like, look, she's a girl turtle. She's got tits. Look at them. And it's, I don't know who thought this was like a great design. And I had to bring it up, man. It's a part of Turtles history now.
Yeah, it's like nobody went mission. Like, yeah, like you said, they're turtles. Like, they don't have mammary glands. It makes no sense for her to have tits right now. Doesn't matter. She's a girl. Somebody's got to know.
Gotta have them. She's a girl. Otherwise, how do you know?